Welcome to World at Work TV. I'm Allison Avalos, and I'm here today with Karen O'Leonard from Willis Towers Watson, and we're talking about productivity. So, there seems to be, Karen, a resurgence in terms of the focus on productivity, both by organizations and even in the news. Start off by defining what we mean by productivity, and then talk a little bit about how we're seeing that change in comparison to maybe 2 years ago.
Yes, well, we're constantly asked, how do you define productivity? Because for many, it is a very amorphous term, and it's thrown around a lot. You'll hear increasing employee engagement will increase your productivity. Improving your total rewards package will improve your productivity. But what does that really mean specifically? Well, we have a very specific definition of productivity, and it's the level of output you achieve for a given level of input. So what does that mean, right?
Right.
Outputs can be things like revenues, products sold. It could be an outcome like customer retention or customer satisfaction. Inputs can be things like number of hours worked, number of employees in a given role. Productivity is becoming more of a focal point now, especially over the last 2 years, because companies just aren't seeing the increase in productivity that they would expect, especially given all the technology advancements we've had. In fact, if you look at the rate of growth of labor productivity over the last decade, it's actually declined. So companies are looking for ways to improve their productivity because it directly is related to their financial metrics and their ability to meet business goals. And so that's becoming more of an issue now as they're seeing a decline in the rate of growth of productivity.
So how can an organization tell if its workforce is productive or not?
Well, the first thing to do is start measuring it. And many organizations automatically jump to measuring it in terms of efficiency. How many goods are you producing per worker, or what's your revenue per worker? But there are other ways to measure productivity as well, such as quality. So you could measure the number of errors or rework needed per batch or per job. You could measure it according to innovation, so the number of patents you're producing per R&D dollar spent. You can measure it according to customer service terms, such as customer retention per account rep or first call resolution rate per call center employee. And you can measure it in terms of brand image. So the number of web hits you're getting per online ad dollar spent. So these are all ways to measure productivity, and an organization needs to decide where it wants to focus, what's your priority area, and then start measuring productivity and tracking it over time. The other thing I'll mention, though, even within a specific area, is that the productivity measures will likely vary by industry. So if you're focused on quality, and you're a healthcare organization, your productivity measure might be patient satisfaction per physician, or the number of readmissions per hospital dollar spent. If you're a transportation company, your quality metrics are going to look quite different, such as the number of damaged packages per mile driven. So depending on your industry, your metrics will vary, but you need to find what your focus area is and what metrics matter to your industry and start measuring and tracking those over time, and if possible, benchmarking those with your competitors to see where do we stand relative to our peers or competitive set.
So you started to talk about something there that was in my mind as you were speaking. So when you identify the metrics you want to measure, the things that are the best indicator of the productivity you're intending to measure, is it about establishing a baseline and looking to increase that? Are there targets or goals an organization sets with that, or is it more about that external benchmarking that you're doing within your industry?
Setting a target is very important and tracking over time. So initially when you measure your productivity metric, set a goal for yourself. Do you want to improve that by, say, 10%, 15%? And then look at how do we fill those gaps? How do we improve that measure? And how do we keep monitoring it and tracking it over time? Is it improving over time? Is it not improving over time? Is it actually diminishing over time? So all this should be an ongoing process where you're continually measuring, evaluating, and diagnosing your gaps to improve that measure. And you might switch to a different measure over time, something in another category. Maybe you're initially focused on quality, you improve in that area, and now you want to focus on, say, innovation or a metric in another category. But getting that baseline measure, setting a goal for yourself, and then tracking that over time is also very important to the process.
So if an organization doesn't feel like it's getting that productivity that it's looking for, where does it start in terms of addressing that?
The organization would need to identify where are the biggest gaps, or alternatively opportunities, for how to improve productivity. And a lot of organizations immediately jump to a technology solution. How do we put in more technology to help us improve productivity? In a lot of cases, a lot of money is spent on technology and it doesn't significantly improve productivity. In fact, in some cases, it might decrease your productivity. So we look at productivity and some of the key drivers as being talent related. And we group these into 4 main areas. One is, are we hiring the right talent with the right skills and developing our current workforce with the right skills? The second area is, what does our culture look like? And do we have a culture that fosters productivity? And are our employees engaged in support of that culture? The third area is around managers and rewards. Are our managers effective at driving to the right results and rewarding and recognizing employees to reach those results? And then the fourth area is healthy workforce and well-being, and not just from the standpoint of physical well-being, but also emotional and financial well-being. Stress is a big issue in most workforces and most workplaces, and especially around finances and financial well-being. So those can be detriments to productivity as well. And so identifying what lever or levers to pull in those areas to improve productivity will be important. And then, as I mentioned, constant measuring to see whether you've moved the needle.
So how do organizations effectively measure the results of their productivity initiatives? And then how do they use that information to inform the future?
Well, that goes back to establishing your baseline measures and then going back to those and measuring over time and tracking over time. Initially, it might be quarterly. With all the big data we have, though, it could be in real time. But putting a stake in the ground and then looking at, have we moved the needle, depending on what gaps you're trying to fill. Let's say you're implementing a new rewards program, or looking at pre-hire assessments to make sure that you're bringing in the right talent. Well, did you move the needle in your productivity measure? And then constantly going back, again, it should be an ongoing process where you're continually going back, seeing if you've moved the needle. Have you met your goal? Are you improving over time and not decreasing productivity over time? And making that part of your process so that it's ongoing. It's not just a one and done where you measure productivity, you do some interventions, and that's it. It should be part of that continual process of measuring, evaluating, diagnosing, and filling gaps.
What role does the Total Rewards professional play in the gathering, analysis, leveraging these productivity initiatives ultimately?
Well, rewards is one of our key areas, making sure that managers are driving to the right results and making sure that KPIs are aligned with goals, recognizing rewarding employees. So if that's found to be a big gap or opportunity for improving a productivity measure, we need to look at, are rewards aligned with goals? How can we structure rewards in such a way that motivate people? And different segments of your workforce are going to be motivated by different rewards. And so, looking at that, optimizing your total rewards for different segments of employees, and then, measuring, have we moved the needle? Do we need to do some more work here?
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
For World at Work TV, I'm Allison Avalos.